Subject of the next BRIC Town Hall is going to be criminal justice reform. That's coming up on March 24th. But ahead of that, we thought we'd prime the pump a little bit with the discussion about Criminal Justice Reform Act that's making its way through the City Council right now. First slide here. The proposal, just on Monday, the City Council, led by Melissa Mark Viverito, introduced a set of 8 proposals designed to eliminate criminal penalties and switch them into civil ones, meaning once arrestable offenses would now get you a summons and hit you in the pocket and not have a threat to put you behind bars. Some of those things include alcohol consumption in public, excessive noise, public urination, and violating parking rules. There are other 4 things that can also land you formally in jail, but now could be under the discretion of cops. Moving on. The numbers, there are 81% of the 7.3 million people hit with those violations between 2001 and 2013 were people of color, Black or Hispanic people in particular, and it brought in some $8.7 million worth of fines and led to about 510,000 open arrest warrants for those offenses. Final slide here, we're looking at the burden. Instead of going into the criminal court, if you ever got a summons, you waited in that long line outside before going in for a hearing, those matters are going to be shifted to the Office of Administrative Hearings and Trials. And they processed 750,000 summons last year and had 300,000 hearings. We can expect that number to rise significantly if this proposal passes. Back to Aaron.
After a hearing Monday and many media and political battles, there seems to be agreement among all key parties, the mayor, the NYPD, the speaker, and the city council. But will this act really have a positive impact on the most affected communities? Will it be too costly for our already backed up justice system? And most important, how will this be implemented on the streets and in the courts? We want to welcome back to BK Live both Robert Ganji, founder and director of PROP, the Police Reform Organizing Project. Nice to see you again, sir.
Good to be here.
And Johnny Perez, an advocate for the Urban Justice Center Mental Health Project. And welcome back.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Now, gentlemen, the Criminal Justice Reform Act of 2016.
I just want to say something a little bit as an aside, that one of you gentlemen mentioned before that you had not seen The Godfather. And
here we go.
Yeah, all right. Now, if we're talking about what infraction should be punishable by either a civil summons or criminal summons, someone who has not seen The Godfather, who's over 20, and who admits it publicly, that's 2 infractions.
That's two infractions.
Oh, okay, all right.
Barely over 20.
I'm just saying. Okay.
What were you saying about criminal justice before you put me on blast?
You're going to be taken away in shackles.
I hope so. The NYPD is on its way, by the way.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Invite them down to sit down and have a discussion with us. Okay, the Criminal Justice Reform Act of 2013. Is this just another form of broken windows, less criminal but more civil?
It is, in our view, one of the problems with it. We at PROP are very aggressively opposed to the legislation. We think one of the problems with it, we think there are a number of problems with it. I guess the fundamental one is that the main problem with policing today, not just today, as far back as anybody can remember, is that it's blatantly racially biased. You saw the statistic on the screen that 81% of the people who got summonses between 2001 and 2013 were Black and Hispanic people. The things that Black and Hispanic people get summonses for in New York City have been virtually decriminalized in well-off white communities. And that's just, it's not us making up that criticism. The numbers show that. All anecdotal evidence shows that. This legislation does nothing to address the blatant racial bias of policing. And our view at PROP more and more is the only change that we, and I think more and more reformers are interested in, is fundamental change. Change that really makes a significant move to providing equal justice for all people. America aspires to equal justice. Anyone who knows anything about the criminal justice system knows that our system falls far short of that ideal. So we are looking for and promoting fundamental change. We think these bills are at best kind of window dressing. They still leave the authority for enforcing these infractions in the hands of police. The police We don't know what the specific guidelines are yet because it's not included in the legislation. Yeah. The NYPD is going to be developing the guidelines. We don't have any particular trust in an NYPD led by Bill Bratton that's committed to broken windows policing. And Bratton has been very explicit. He doesn't intend to lighten up on broken windows enforcement in New York City. One other point, I know Johnny should speak too, is that police already have discretion. When they see somebody in the park after dark, they have the discretion, particularly if that person's just walking his or her dog kind of thing, they have the discretion to say, look, right, why don't you leave the park now? They don't have to give that person a ticket. They don't have to arrest that person. Yeah. So
you're saying they do already have the authority to issue warnings? And
they certainly have the authority to issue warnings. In some of these infractions, they do also have the authority to issue a civil court rather than a criminal court summons. So we don't see what this is really accomplishing, and what we see is, in some ways, it's in codifying and entrenching the basic problem that it's still going to be the NYPD that's the arbiter of appropriate behavior. And it's almost, the NYPD makes judgment, in effect, about appropriate behavior in New York City now only in low-income communities of color.
So, Johnny, if the mayor, the architect, and the speaker of the city council are all behind these reforms, and the commissioner is the architect of the broken windows thing, so if they're all behind these reforms, what do they and your organization know that Robert and the people at Prop don't?
Well, do they know that Robert don't?
Yeah.
I don't know what they do know, what they don't know. I do think that when I think about this piece, and I wonder, is this another form of kind of criminalizing poverty? And what I mean by that is that a person who sleeps on a park bench, he's sleeping on a park bench because he has to, not because he wants to, and more than likely can't afford whatever fine might be bestowed upon them if given that fine. On the other hand, I am also for anything that moves people away from getting a criminal record, because we know that having a criminal record has long-term collateral consequences. Felonies are forever, misdemeanors are forever. So we definitely want to move away from that. And then I ask a larger question is, if, when we're talking about this public health or these quality of life, if you will, like I got to side with Robert on that, is the NYPD the proper institution to even address these issues even in the first place?
Who would be then?
That is a good question.
Well, what we're recommending, and I was talking to Johnny about this before. Right now, when someone sees a problem, say, for example, a homeless person that might be causing a disruption or a mentally ill person, they call 911 and the cops get sent. What we're saying is the dispatcher who gets a 911 call should have more options. In many cases, it's more appropriate to send a social worker, more appropriate to send someone who knows about homeless shelters and where there might be an available bed.
A different array of civil services outside.
Would you say this is a mental health issue, or how does this sort of play into that?
In some cases, it is a mental health issue. And in some cases, what the police should be doing is what they do in most white communities, is ignore the so-called infraction. Some people actually get tickets and arrested in New York City for jaywalking. Yeah. Anyone who's lived in New York City all their life, as I have, we jaywalk every day. Yeah. And it's only people of color who get ticketed or arrested, and sometimes actually arrested for jaywalking. Bike on the sidewalk, it's the same thing. Yeah. Open alcohol container, it's the same thing. And remember, the infraction for the alcohol issue is not even drinking. It's carrying an open alcohol container. And our view is, if there's a young black or Latino man sitting on the stoop, drinking a beer, not bothering anybody, what is that the business of the police or any government agency to intervene? Similarly, we know that a white couple drinking wine or champagne in Central Park or listening to a concert, the cops are not going to arrest those people or ticket those people. And that's a function of the racial bias. So some of these infractions should...
about the racial bias, there was something that you guys undertook this thing in November that I thought was genius at Prospect Park, where volunteers went out and ticketed people in white neighborhoods for offenses that are sort of the entry point to criminal justice system in communities of color. And people's minds were sort of blown. Some were pissed off. Some were enlightened and they had their eyes opened up. But if the problem is the criminalization of neighborhoods of color, how would this bill help to change that?
I wanted to say, In a sense, you know, I'm not sure if it does, you know, and the reason I say that is because I've personally have extensive involvement with policing and criminal justice system. And in the neighborhood where I'm from, the only time when we see police officers isn't a punitive kind of interaction. You know, the officer usually has their handcuffs on their hand, ready to handcuff you, or in some type of kind of order and control kind of interaction versus building strong community relationships with the police officers in the first place. Right. You know, people from certain neighborhoods, they think about when they're going to come across and interact with police officers rather than if. And that's a big difference because people in predominantly white neighborhoods, I would argue that they don't think about what I'm going to say to the cops today when they stop me. You know, so that's something to think about.
It's a totally white people. The racial divide in this issue is extraordinary. White people, obviously a white person, most of my friends are white people, about my age, good liberal people, everybody voted for Obama. They have an entirely different experience with policing in New York City than most people of color do. Like, for example, my wife and I raised 2 sons in New York City. They're now 42 and 38, so they're older. We never worried about what could happen to them when they were out in the street.
The talk.
Right. And it's literally no African American or Hispanic parent that I've talked to about this who hasn't felt they have to have the talk because their son might encounter an interaction with the police officer that goes very, very bad. And our city should not, you know, we are a progressive city. We're supposed to be a beacon.
So redesign the law right now for us. What would it look like if you had your druthers and you were in the city council and said, all right, these 8, not so much. This is what it should look like if we want to make substantive change. You're fighting for hearts and minds, but the laws can sort of lead that.
Right. Well, we would actually not pay that much attention to the actual laws because we don't think legislation is going to help with this. The practices in the NYPD are ingrained.
So it's a training issue.
Well, it's not so much a training. I think it's government setting priorities. So our recommendations are that government should take steps to reduce the resources, reduce the headcount, reduce the budget for the NYPD, put those resources into agencies or government agencies or nonprofit groups who could more responsibly and effectively and benignly respond to problems with mentally ill people, respond to problems with homeless people.
At the same time, fair beating, drinking in public, public urination, littering, parking at the wrong spot, biking on the sidewalk, unreasonable noise, and the last of those things is failure to obey parking signs. All of these aren't mental health, homeless, I don't know any better issues.
Well, some of them are. I mean, some of the clearly park after dark issues are often will involve people who are homeless or mentally ill. Excessive noise can, even drinking. Our point is, if someone is drinking in public, but they are not being disruptive, they are not being threatening to anybody, that's not a crime. Our point is also, if someone is in the park after dark, just hanging out, walking their dog, that's not a crime. We have had, because we talk to a lot of people who've been harassed by the cops, we've had conversations with more than one person who has told us they were stopped by a police officer in the park. Let's say the sign says 9 o'clock. It's 8:45. The officer stops the person, is about to give them a ticket. The person says, wait, it's not, it's still 15 minutes to go. There's 2 instances where we've heard about this, both with African American or Latino people. The officer detains them for the 15 minutes
and then writes the ticket.
And then gives them the ticket or arrests them. And then tells the person, in both cases, don't worry about this, the court's going to throw that out. And the problem there is in part, our view, is the quota system.
My day.
The cop does not get credit if the cop tells you, hey, you better get out of the park, or if you got your bike on the sidewalk, does not get credit to say, take that into the street. The cop only gets credit for the punitive interaction. And the punitive action doesn't have to hold up in court. Yeah. Just writing the ticket and making the arrest,
well, I have
the
a
cop
number
gets
that 20% of the tickets in 2013 were thrown out on a factual basis or just, it was bunked.
Exactly.
Johnny, do you think this could ultimately be a way to end up just sort of taxing poor neighborhoods?
Yeah, I strongly believe that. I think that, you have people that are you have people that are in a lot of different ways. I have clients who have been arrested for loitering inside their own building because they couldn't prove residence.
You laugh.
You know?
That's not
I know.
funny.
Yeah,
That's
because
not
yeah.
funny.
But there's a comic
You know?
aspect to some of this.
Yeah.
The kids tell me that I'm standing in front of my own building and I get arrested for trespass.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. And in the mental health project, we often see people who were arrested or become just as involved for just sort of like having reactions to their symptoms. And in a sense, we have criminalized mental illness. A person shouldn't have to say, put me in handcuffs so I can go to jail and then receive mental treatment. A person should be diverted and even kept from even going there in the first place. To answer your question as far as taxing, it's a fact that people from low-income neighborhoods just don't happen to have money laying around to pay for things. Might be the reason why they happen to turnstile in the first place or sleeping on a park bench in the first place. I think that what's going to happen when a person can't pay, how that's going to affect the person's credit, have other collateral consequences down the line. I think that we really need to be mindful, and we understand that officers do have discretion, and then the question comes up of whether they're going to practice that discretion more in certain neighborhoods versus other neighborhoods, and what's most likely to happen, and what's the best thing that can happen in a situation. So,
and the quota system is a problem. I was having a conversation with a police officer now.
This is going to be the last 10 seconds.
Oh, okay. And
Make
he
it
said
good.
to me that there are some precincts that have quotas and some that don't. So the neighborhood where I live, which is the west side of Manhattan, there's no quota. It's mainly white. It's mainly well-to-do. I'm walking my dog late at night. I can smell marijuana, but nobody there is worried about being arrested because they're smoking marijuana in the street. But he said when cops go to some precincts, a new precinct that's in a low-income community color, one of their first questions is, what's the number? In other words, that cop wants to know how many tickets they have to give out, how many arrests they have to make in order to get a positive job evaluation.
All right, that's going to be the last word. We'll definitely keep an eye on that legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Please do.
thanks for having me.
Thank you.